Imagine the most feared duke in England, cold as steel, untouchable by any woman, stepping into a candlelit ballroom, only to watch his war beast do the unthinkable. What could make a creature that has thrown men like dolls kneel? And why would it choose a poor maid, one with nothing but a defiant stare and a soul that refuses to bow? Was it instinct, or a warning, a blessing, or a claim? And when the entire room falls silent, will the duke protect her, or destroy everyone who dares to look at her? If you love scandal, secrets, and a duke whose mask of ice cracks for only one woman, stay right here. Now subscribe for more addictive Regency drama. Like this video if you felt that chill, and share it with a friend who lives for ruthless romance and shocking twists. Let's begin. London wore its winter like a curse, fog clinging to iron railings, slipping under doors, settling on skin with a cold that felt personal. The city smelled of coal smoke and damp wool, of wet stone and restless horses. Even the finest streets could not escape it. Even the richest homes could not keep it out. The world of silk and crystal simply learned to breathe through the chill and call it refinement. Inside the grand house hosting tonight's gathering, warmth existed only because men paid for it. Firelight licked at polished wood and gilded frames, but it could not burn away the sharper heat of gossip. Words moved faster than servants, softer than music, and far more dangerous. Names were passed like cards at a gambling table, some with admiration, most with appetite. And the name that always changed the air was Blackwood. Duke Leo Blackwood did not need to enter a room to be present in it. He lived in the pauses between laughter, in the way shoulders straightened when his title was spoken. They called him ruthless with the same reverence they used for storms. They said he was too young to be so hard, too composed to be anything but cruel. That his eyes were winter glass, and his smile, when it came, was the kind that made men forget their prayers. But there was another legend tied to his, one that made even the boldest mouths grow careful. His war beast, not merely a horse, not merely a prized animal bred for beauty and parade. This one was spoken of like a weapon given a heartbeat, a creature that had thrown grooms, snapped halters, and left grown men white-faced in the mud. A beast that obeyed no hand but the duke's, and even then, only when it pleased. Some swore it could sense fear the way wolves sensed blood. Others claimed it had been trained on battlefields, taught to trample hesitation and bite through screams. Tonight, the aristocracy wanted to see it, not out of love, but out of hunger. The same hunger that made them lean closer to tragedy, smiling behind fans, calling it entertainment. Martha Wayne moved through that hunger like a blade wrapped in plain cloth. She did not belong to the glittering circle of titled guests. Her hands had known hard work. Her sleeves had known heat from kitchens and cold from corridors no one noticed. Yet she carried herself with a quiet defiance that did not ask permission. The world tried to teach women like her to shrink. Martha did not shrink. She simply learned to be still. Still enough that those who watched her could not decide if she was frightened or fearless. A lady's laugh skimmed across the room, sharp as a pin. A gentleman's voice followed, casual and cruel, tossing a remark in Martha's direction as if she were furniture that could blush. The insult was small, fashionable, wrapped in politeness. Martha stopped. She turned her head, not too fast, not too slow, and met his eyes with a calm that unsettled. "How fortunate," she said, her voice soft as the brush of silk, "that you were born noble. It saves you from needing to earn anything at all." The gentleman's smile faltered. A few nearby listeners went unnaturally still, as if the air had tightened around their throats. Martha did not wait for approval. She moved again, leaving the words behind like a door quietly closing. Then the music shifted, and the house seemed to brace itself. A servant hurried in, face pale with the kind of excitement that bordered on fear. His announcement did not come with flourish. It did not need it. "The Duke of Blackwood has arrived," he said, "and he has brought the beast." The room went silent, not with reverence, but with anticipation so sharp it tasted like metal. And somewhere beyond the warmth of the candles, a deep, impatient sound answered, hoof against stone. leather straining, breath like a low warning in the fog. Martha's spine did not bend, but for the first time that night, her pulse spoke louder than her pride, because the beast was not just coming, it was coming close. The first thing the room surrendered was its sound. Laughter thinned. Conversation broke apart into cautious fragments. Even the music seemed to hesitate, as if it had learned the shape of danger and recognized it by instinct. Duke Leo Blackwood did not need to raise his voice to be obeyed. His presence did the work for him, quiet, inevitable, absolute. He crossed the threshold with the same composure men carried into battle when they had already accepted the cost. His coat held the night's chill in its seams. His gloves looked too clean for a world this dirty. There was no flourish to him, no eager charm, no hunger for approval. He wore his title the way a blade wore its edge, without apology. Politeness rushed toward him like frightened birds. Bows, smiles, compliments that tasted like sugar meant to hide poison. He received them with a slight inclination of his head, the kind granted to strangers who were allowed to exist near him, nothing more. The fire in the hearth crackled, but the warmth did not reach his eyes. Those eyes moved across the gathering with measured control, not counting faces, assessing them, not searching for admiration, separating threat from nuisance. He had the look of a man who trusted nothing that could be bought, and no one who smiled too quickly. Behind him, the night answered with a sound that did not belong to music or laughter. A heavy stomp, another, the scrape of iron against stone, leather pulling tight, then a low, impatient breath that carried the raw scent of animal strength and wet fog. It reached the doorway like a warning that had learned to breathe. The guests pretended not to flinch. They failed. Someone's fan snapped open too fast. A glass chimed against crystal. A lady's hand tightened around her husband's arm. A few men leaned forward with the bright-eyed cruelty of boys watching a dog fight. "The beast," someone whispered, too pleased with the word. The Duke did not acknowledge the comment. He did not need to. The world already revolved around his silence. Martha Wayne kept moving, because stillness could draw attention, and attention could turn into punishment. She adjusted a tray, steadied a candlestick, listened to the room the way a sailor listened to an approaching storm. She felt eyes slide over her and dismiss her, until they didn't. Until curiosity, bored and hungry, began to sharpen. A gentleman near the centre, one of those men who believed wit excused cruelty, laughed softly. "It's a pity His Grace won't let the beast loose among us. It might improve the company." A ripple of amusement followed, thin and nervous. It was the kind of joke that required a victim to taste sweet. Martha's fingers curled around the edge of the silver. She did not look down. She did not smile. She let the words pass through her, as if they had no weight. Then the Duke's gaze shifted, brief, almost accidental, and landed on her. It should have felt like any other glance from any other gentleman. It did not. It felt like being measured by something older than manners, something that could decide, in a heartbeat, whether you were worth saving or worth crushing. Martha met it without dropping her eyes, because she had survived worse judges than aristocrats in warm rooms. For the smallest moment, something tightened at the corner of his mouth. As if her defiance had struck a memory he kept locked behind bone. The next sound came louder. A harsh exhale, a stomp that rattled the air. The impatient violence of a creature refusing restraint. And then a voice rose, too eager, too proud, declaring that the beast would be brought forward for everyone to witness properly, as if danger existed to entertain them. Martha felt the room tilt towards spectacle. She also felt, with a cold certainty, that someone was about to make her the cost of their amusement. They said the beast could smell weakness the way smoke found cracks in a door. They said it learned fear by tasting it, first from battlefields, then from grooms who lied with brave hands and trembling hearts. Tonight, the house wanted proof that the Duke's legend had teeth. Proof that danger could be borrowed for an evening and returned before dawn like a cloak. It began with laughter, too eager, followed by the rustle of skirts, shifting for a better view. Someone demanded the animal be brought nearer, as if calling a storm closer would make it obey. Servants moved with rigid care, faces blank with the trained emptiness of people who knew that expression could be punished. Martha felt the choice forming around her before anyone spoke her name. That was how cruelty worked in fine rooms. It never called itself cruelty. It called itself amusement, curiosity, a harmless test. A hand brushed her elbow, light, dismissive, and a gentleman murmured about helping and showing his grace we are not cowards. The words were polished. The intent was not. "I don't perform," Martha answered. The gentleman's smile tightened. "Then you'll be the reason someone else must." Martha could have stepped back. She could have lowered her gaze and offered the small surrender the world demanded from those without titles. Instead, she moved forward. One measured step, not toward the man, but toward the low, dangerous breath that had haunted the edges of the evening. The scent reached her first. Leather, cold iron, and something wilder underneath. Then came the sound. Hooves striking stone as if arguing with the earth, a chain shifting, a handler muttering a prayer through clenched teeth. When the beast surged into nearness, the room's bravado faltered. A hissed inhale. It was not beauty that struck Martha, but force, raw and undomesticated, held back only by pain and habit. The animal's eyes were bright and hard, winter stars that did not care if you lived. It saw her, not as a servant, not as a toy for their sport. It fixed on her with a focus that made hairs rise along her arms. The handlers tightened their grip. The beast's muscles bunched, ready to strike. Martha did not retreat. She kept her hands empty at her sides and spoke as if it were a soul, not a spectacle. "Enough," she murmured, not as command, but as truth. For a heartbeat, the world forgot how to move. The beast's nostrils flared. Its head dipped, then snapped up, as though wrestling something it did not understand. And then, impossibly, it lowered itself. One foreleg bent, then the other. The great body sank until a knee met the ground with a dull, reverent thud. Not training, not trick, recognition. The hush that followed was so complete it felt like sin. Martha's pulse thundered, but her face stayed steady. Somewhere behind her, a voice whispered the Duke's name like a confession, because the only man who could explain this was the one who owned the beast, and he was coming. Silence did not fall in that house. It was seized. The kind of silence that made people suddenly aware of their own breathing, of the heat behind their ears, of the small indecencies in their thoughts, the kind that turned a ballroom into a court of law. The beast remained lowered, not in surrender, but in judgment, and the room did not know what to do with a judgment that came from something untamed. Martha stood before it as if she had always belonged there. A lady's lips parted, then closed again. A man cleared his throat and failed to reclaim the moment. The laughter that had carried them a minute ago was gone, stripped away like a mask ripped too fast. What remained was fear, dressed in velvet. Then Duke Leo Blackwood's voice cut through the hush, not loud, not angry, simply present, like steel laid on a table. "Step away." No one could have said whether he meant Martha or the crowd. Perhaps he meant both. Perhaps he meant the entire world. He moved closer, and the space obeyed him without being asked. People shifted back, creating a path as naturally as water parted around a stone. He did not look at the handlers first. He did not look at the gentlemen with their polished cruelty. His gaze went to the beast, his war beast, and then, with a precision that felt like a private wound, to Martha. The smallest fracture appeared in his composure, not in his posture, but in his eyes, a flicker of something that did not belong to him in public, disbelief, sharpened into need. "What did you do?" he asked. The question was simple. The room made it obscene. They heard accusation in it. They hung their hopes on the idea that she must have cheated the laws of nature, because the alternative was unbearable, that something pure had happened in their polluted little circle. Martha lifted her chin a fraction. "Nothing," she said. "I didn't lie." A ripple ran through the guests, swift as a draught. A duke's beast had knelt. A poor maid had answered the duke without trembling. and the world of titles, built on obedience, did not know where to place its outrage. Someone laughed too sharply. Or perhaps she's bewitched it. Another voice, syrupy with disdain, answered, "A creature like that doesn't kneel, not unless it's broken or fooled." The word fooled clung to Martha's skin like grime. She turned her head slightly toward the speakers, her expression calm enough to be cruel. "It's strange," she said, "how quickly you praise bravery in yourselves and call it deception in others." That did it. The air tightened. The room, embarrassed by its own fear, reached for punishment. They could not strike the Duke. They could not strike the beast, so they reached for the only target permitted by their rules. The host, smiling as if he were offering a kindness, stepped forward with practiced charm. "We must be sensible," he said. "His Grace's reputation is not a toy, nor is the safety of my guests. If this miracle is real, it can be repeated. If it is not, then we cannot allow a servant to make sport of us." Martha felt the trap close around her like a velvet noose. "Let her prove it," the host continued, voice smooth as poured wine. "Let her do it again, here and now. And if she cannot—" He let the sentence hang, sweet and threatening. The beast's ears flicked. A low sound vibrated in its chest, warning without moving. The Duke's jaw tightened. His hand remained still at his side, but something in him shifted, something cold deciding whether to become violent. Martha's gaze met his for one suspended moment. She did not beg. She simply said, "Very well." And as the room leaned in, hungry, cruel, delighted by the promise of her failure, the beast began to rise. The moment the beast lifted from its kneel, the room breathed again, too greedily, too loud. As if relief could be worn like a victory, the host's smile remained fixed, but his eyes glittered with calculation. He did not want truth. He wanted Martha to fail in a way that made everyone feel righteous about enjoying it. They cleared a space with the same careful enthusiasm used to arrange a duel, polite hands guiding bodies backward, murmured apologies that tasted of cruelty. Ladies gathered in a tight crescent, fans fluttering like nervous wings. Gentlemen leaned forward with the bright impatience of men who had never paid for their own mistakes. Martha felt it all. The heat from the crowded air, the sting of smoke in her throat, the cold slipping in from every crack where fog pressed against the house. She also felt the beast's attention, heavy and watchful, like a storm deciding where to strike. "Again," the host said softly. "Do as you did." It was the softest command, delivered as if to a trained pet. It made something sharp flash behind Martha's calm. "You want me to repeat a moment you do not understand," she replied, voice steady. "And if I cannot, you will call it fraud." The host gave a little shrug, as if fairness bored him. "We must protect ourselves from theatrics." The word hung in the air like a slap. Martha turned to the beast, up close. Its strength felt endless. Muscle coiled beneath dark hide, breath steaming faintly, eyes reflecting firelight with a wild, unblinking intelligence. The handlers tightened the chain as if it were prayer. One of them was sweating through his collar. Another mouthed something that might have been a warning. Martha did not move like a performer. She did not reach out too quickly. She approached as she had the first time, measured, honest, unafraid to be seen. Her hands remained open. Her shoulders remained relaxed, not submissive, simply controlled. The beast's ears pinned back. A murmur rose at once, pleased and vicious. They wanted it to charge. They wanted her to shrink. They wanted to watch courage collapse. And then the trap revealed itself. Someone laughed too close. A gentleman stepped forward abruptly, pretending curiosity, but his movement was meant to startle. A lady let out a sharp sound, high and false. Another man clapped once, loud like cracking a whip. The beast surged. The chain snapped taut. Hooves struck stone. A raw, violent sound tore from its throat, and the crowd flinched as a single body. A few ladies stumbled back, skirts tangling. A man swore under his breath, suddenly remembering he could be killed. Martha did not run. She shifted her stance, grounding herself, and lifted her gaze directly into the beast's, Her voice cut through the noise, not loud, not pleading, not sweet. Enough. There was no ornament in the word. It was a blade. The beast's forward drive faltered by a hair. Its breath blasted hot into the cold air, angry and confused. The handlers strained, faces whitening. The room held its breath again, but this time it was not anticipation. It was fear. Martha stepped closer, not because she was reckless, but because she refused to be controlled by their cruelty. "You're trying to make him hate me," she said, not to the beast but to the room, calmly exposing what they'd done. "That tells me everything I need to know about you." A sharp hush answered her, the kind that came when truth landed too cleanly. The beast stamped once, hard, then swung its head, eyes flashing, not toward Martha, but toward the people crowding near. Its body angled, instinctively placing itself between her and them, a protective wall made of muscle and rage. And across the space, Duke Leo Blackwood's silence turned lethal, because now he understood. This was no test. This was an attempted execution, disguised as entertainment. The beast stood between Martha and the crowd like a verdict no one could appeal. Its breath came hard, white in the cold, and every tense line of its body promised what would happen if someone tried to touch her again. The handlers did not dare pull. The gentlemen who had laughed a moment ago suddenly remembered their own bones. The ladies, so proud of their composure, clutched at silk and pearls as if finery could protect them from consequence. And then Duke Leo Blackwood moved. He did not rush. He did not stride with theatrical anger. He advanced with the same measured calm he had worn since entering the house. Only now it had sharpened into something colder than etiquette. The space opened for him at once. Not because someone ordered it, but because no one wanted to be the first obstacle. When he reached the beast, he laid one gloved hand against its neck, steady, familiar. The animal did not flinch. It did not fight him. It lowered its head a fraction, as if acknowledging a master it respected and a war it was ready to wage. Leo's gaze lifted to the host. The room waited for a gentleman's reprimand. It received a duke's execution. "You arranged this," Leo said quietly. The host's smile twitched. "Your Grace, you misunderstand. We only meant—" "You meant to watch her break," Leo interrupted, tone even, almost bored. "And if she bled, you would call it accident." The word bled made several faces blanch, because they knew it was true. They had dressed cruelty and civility for so long they had started to believe their own lies. A gentleman recovered enough to speak, bristling with offended pride. "Surely you cannot hold your entire company responsible for a servant's—" Leo turned his head slightly, and the man's voice died in his throat. It was a simple movement, but it carried the weight of a door locking. "Say it again," Leo said, very softly, "and I will remind you what responsibility looks like." Silence swallowed the man whole. Martha watched from behind the beast's shoulder, her chin lifted, eyes clear. There was no gratitude trembling in her, no desperate relief. Only a steady awareness that the Duke's protection could be another kind of trap if she let it become one. Leo's attention shifted to her, and the mask of ice held, almost perfectly. Only the smallest crack showed in the intensity of his focus, as if her refusal to crumble had unsettled something in him that had been settled for years. "You should have stepped back," he said, not as scolding, but as harsh recognition of danger. Martha's mouth curved faintly, a smile without softness. "So you could pretend you didn't see what they were doing?" A flicker crossed his eyes, approval, perhaps, or irritation at how cleanly she cut to the truth. The host tried again, voice silk smooth. "Your Grace, the beast is unsettled. We must restore order. Remove the girl from—" Leo's hand lifted, not in warning, but in finality. "No," he said. One syllable, the kind that ended arguments and began funerals. He turned slightly, addressing the room without raising his voice. "You want order." His gaze swept across the faces, the jewels, the polished smiles. "Then learn it." He stepped closer to Martha, close enough that the warmth of his presence met the cold surrounding her. He did not touch her. Touch could imply ownership, but he placed himself where everyone could see the choice he was making. "This woman," Leo said, voice still calm, "will not be used for your sport." A lady's voice, brittle with outrage, hissed, "She is no one." Martha answered before the Duke could. "That's the comfort you cling to," she said quietly, "because if I am no one, then what you do to me doesn't stain you." The words landed like a slap. Several people looked away, suddenly fascinated by the floor. Leo's jaw tightened, not at Martha, but at the room. Then he spoke again, and the air seemed to freeze in place. "She is under my protection." The phrase struck like thunder, not because it was romantic, because it was political, because it was dangerous. The host's face went pale beneath his smile. "Your Grace." "A servant." Leo's eyes did not blink. "A soul," he corrected, voice flat. "And my beast has already chosen." At that, the animal lowered its head again, not kneeling this time, but bowing just enough to make the message unmistakable. The entire room went silent for a second time. And Martha, instead of bowing to the Duke's power, looked up at him with calm defiance and said, "Don't make me your weapon." Leo's gaze held hers like a vow carved in ice. "Too late," he murmured, so low only truth could hear it. "They already tried to kill you with laughter." The house tried to recover the way a wounded animal tried to stand, too quickly, too proudly, pretending the blood did not exist. Music resumed in timid fragments. Voices returned in careful tones, like people stepping around a spill they refused to name. But nothing truly restarted. The air had changed, and everyone knew it. Martha felt it in the way eyes followed her now, not dismissive, not bored, but sharpened into calculation. A servant could be invisible. A servant under a duke's protection became a scandal with a pulse. She refused to be guided like property. When a footman attempted to steer her toward the kitchens, she shifted aside with smooth certainty and kept walking, the beast's earlier warmth still lingering in her bones like a memory of thunder. She could hear the whispers trailing behind her, dressed up as concern. "Bold little thing. Madness. Blackwood has finally lost his senses. Or perhaps he has found a new amusement." Amusement. That word again. Always the same excuse. Always the same attempt to shrink a woman into a toy. Martha's hands were steady as she moved through a corridor where the heat thinned and the cold returned. The fog outside pressed against the glass, turning London into a smudged dream. Somewhere deeper in the house, servants spoke in quick, frightened murmurs. Someone mentioned the beast's bow like a prayer. Someone else whispered that the Duke had never spoken like that for anyone. Martha did not let it soften her. Protection could become a cage if you forgot whose life you were living. She reached a quiet landing and paused only long enough to breathe. Coal smoke, beeswax, damp wool, London's perfume. And beneath it, something else. Ink, old paper, and the faint metallic scent of fear. A voice came from the shadows, smooth, educated, amused. "Wayne." Martha turned her head. A gentleman stood half hidden by the dimness, the sort of man whose coat fit too well and whose smile never touched his eyes. Not young, not old, danger existed at every age. His gaze held the lazy confidence of someone who had ruined lives for sport and never been punished for it. "You shouldn't say my name like you own it," Martha replied. The man's smile widened. "But it is your name, and names are fascinating, especially the ones that fall." The chill that went through her had nothing to do with the fog. It was recognition. Her past reaching for her throat with gloved fingers. "What do you want?" she asked. "To watch," he said softly. "To see how long you can pretend you are only a servant girl with sharp eyes and a sharper tongue. To see how long His Grace can pretend he is only protecting you." Martha's gaze did not waver. "If you have a threat, speak it plainly. Men like you hide behind manners because you're afraid of honest words." A faint laugh. "You're right. Honest words are dangerous. He took a slow step closer, lowering his voice as if sharing a secret. Here is one. Your surname doesn't belong in these corridors. It belongs in an old scandal that London still remembers when it is bored. Martha's jaw tightened. She did not deny it. Denial was a luxury for people who could afford to be believed. And here is another honest word, the man continued, eyes bright with cruelty. Blackwood's world runs on reputation. He can crush men in Parliament, bankrupt families with a sentence, silence entire circles with a glance. But even he cannot protect a woman from a story once the right mouths start telling it. Martha's voice stayed calm. So, you'll tell it. Oh, I won't need to, he said, almost kindly. The house will. Your little moment with the beast gave them a new hunger, and when people are hungry, they bite the nearest throat. His gaze slid over her like a blade testing skin. Unless the Duke buys your silence with a ring. Martha stepped closer until the man had to look up a fraction. If you think my price is jewelry, you've already lost. For the first time, his expression flickered. Annoyance, perhaps, or the smallest hint of respect. Then he inclined his head, polite as poison. Then let's see whose will breaks first, he murmured. Yours or his? Footsteps sounded behind her, measured, heavy, controlled. The air tightened, as if it recognized authority. Martha did not turn immediately. She already knew who it was. Duke Leo Blackwood's voice came low and cold from the corridor. Step away from her. The gentleman's smile returned as if nothing had happened. Your Grace, merely a conversation. Leo's reply was quiet enough to be lethal. Conversations have consequences. Martha finally turned to face the Duke. His expression was carved from ice again, perfect and unreadable, except for the way his gaze pinned the other man like a threat waiting for permission. Then a servant appeared at the far end of the hall, breathless, holding a letter on a silver tray, as if it were a weapon too dangerous to touch. The seal was dark. The handwriting on the front was deliberate. The messenger swallowed. For you, Your Grace. It was delivered by hand. Urgent. Leo took it without hurry, but the air around him changed the moment he read the name. Martha watched his eyes harden, the crack in his mask sealing into something colder. What is it? She asked. Leo lifted his gaze to her, and for the first time his voice held a warning that sounded almost like restraint. A challenge, he said softly. And they've chosen you as the battleground. The letter did not tremble in Duke Leo Blackwood's hand. Nothing ever trembled in his hand. But the air around him sharpened, as if the paper carried a blade instead of ink. He read once, then again, slowly, like a man tasting poison to learn its origin. Martha watched his face with the careful attention of someone who had survived men with power. His expression remained carved in winter, yet something moved beneath it. Calculation, restraint, the quiet fury of a predator forced to play by rules designed for weaker creatures. They want spectacle, Leo said at last. And they always do, Martha replied. Her voice did not soften. But why send this to you? Why not to me? Leo's gaze lifted, and there it was, one clean crack in the ice, not pity, not tenderness, something harsher, recognition. Because you are not considered a person in their eyes, he said, you are considered a message. The words should have stung. Martha did not flinch, then let them read it clearly. A servant hovered nearby, pale and anxious, waiting for permission to breathe. Somewhere below, the party continued in a strained imitation of normalcy. Music pretending it had not heard the truth, laughter pretending it had not tried to kill someone. The house smelled of wax and pride and the faint, sour sweetness of fear. Leo folded the letter with brutal neatness. It's a formal demand, he said. They claim my beast was provoked into endangering guests. They claim you incited it. They want you dismissed publicly, humiliated, made an example, so the room can cleanse itself of the shame you gave it. Martha's eyes narrowed. And if you refuse? Leo's mouth curved into something that was not a smile. Then they threaten to unleash a story. Martha felt the corridor grow colder. She heard the earlier voice saying her surname like a chain. Leo continued, calm as a judge. They'll say you are not Martha Wayne the maid. They'll say you are Martha Wayne the stain, connected to an old scandal that certain families still use as a cautionary tale. Martha held his gaze. So they know. Someone does, Leo said, and they are counting on shame to do what they could not. Martha's chin lifted. Shame only works on people who believe they deserve it. For a heartbeat, the Duke simply stared at her, as if that sentence had struck bone. Then his eyes shifted past her, to where the shadows deepened, as though he could already see the faces that would gather tomorrow, judging, condemning, congratulating themselves for being cruel. They want you to disappear quietly, Leo said, or loudly. Either way, they want you gone. Martha took one step closer, not toward him in submission, but toward the truth between them. Then don't hide me, she said. Don't lock me behind your name and call it protection. I won't be kept like a secret to make you comfortable. His jaw tightened. You think I want comfort? I think you want control, Martha answered, steady and unafraid. And I understand it. Control is the only mercy men like you trust. But if you save me by erasing me, you become the same as them, just with better manners. The Duke's eyes flared. Anger, yes, but not at her courage, at the fact that she had named him correctly. Outside, a low, distant sound rolled through the house, hoof against stone, impatient, heavy. The beast, even apart, it seemed to feel the tension like weather. Leo exhaled once, slow. When he spoke again, his voice was quieter, colder, and far more dangerous. I will not erase you, he said. I will end them. Martha did not blink. Then end them with truth, she said, not with blood. A soft sound came from the stairs. Another servant, another message, another attempt to herd the night back into its old shape. The host requested the Duke's presence. The matter required immediate resolution. The room wanted him in front of everyone, where pressure could be applied like a thumb to a bruise. Leo's gaze locked on Martha. If you walk into that room with me, he said, they will try to break you with whispers first. If that fails, they will escalate. Martha's voice was a blade wrapped in velvet. Let them. For the first time, Leo's mask shifted, not melting, not softening, but opening enough to reveal a truth he never showed. He respected her. Perhaps he feared her too, because fear and respect often lived in the same house. Very well, he murmured. But understand this, once you step forward, there is no returning to invisibility. Martha's eyes did not waver. Good, she said. I was tired of being unseen. Together, they moved toward the sound of music and mouths sharpening into knives, toward a room eager to watch a maid fall. And somewhere in the cold beyond the walls, the war beast answered with a low, rising warning, as if it already knew the next blow would not be delivered with laughter. The moment they returned to the heart of the gathering, the room pretended it had never been afraid. Smiles reappeared like painted masks, voices sweetened. Ladies lifted their chins as if dignity could be summoned on command, as if the air had not already tasted the truth. Yet beneath the music and the polite laughter, something tightened, an animal tension the aristocracy rarely admitted to feeling. Hunger, the kind that made them circle a scandal the way wolves circled a wounded deer. They were waiting for Martha to step into the open and become small. She did not. She walked with her head high, not imitating nobility, not begging it for shelter, simply refusing to bow to the lie that poverty meant weakness. She felt eyes rake over her, measuring her seams, her posture, the set of her mouth. She felt the silent question everywhere. Who does she think she is? Duke Leo Blackwood moved beside her without offering his arm. The gesture would have implied ownership. Instead, he gave the room something far worse, certainty. He stood close enough to claim the space around her, not as a lover displaying a prize, but as a ruler declaring a border. The host approached at once, flanked by men whose names carried weight in Parliament, and women whose whispers could ruin marriages. He wore a careful expression, the kind designed to look reasonable while holding a knife. "Your Grace," the host began smoothly, "we must address what occurred. Several guests felt endangered. The beast." "The beast behaved exactly as it was treated," Leo replied, calm and final. A murmur rose, offended, delighted. Outrage was always entertaining when it did not land on one's own skin. One gentleman, older, confident, cruel in the way only the untouchable could afford, tilted his head. "Is it your position, Blackwood, that a servant girl may provoke a war animal and then hide behind your title?" Martha's gaze snapped to him. "Is it your position," she asked softly, "that men may bait a creature into violence and call it a lady's entertainment?" The gentleman's mouth tightened. "Know your place." Martha smiled, small, controlled, lethal. "I do. It's simply not beneath your boot." A ripple of shock moved through the circle. A few ladies gasped behind their fans. Someone laughed, too sharp, as if they could turn her defiance into a joke and swallow it that way. Leo's voice cut through the noise. "Enough." A hush fell again, because when Leo spoke like that, the room remembered who held the axe. The host recovered, still smiling. "This does not need to become ugly. We can resolve it properly, dismiss her, publicly, restore peace, and we need not mention the unfortunate history attached to the name Wayne." There it was, the loaded gun placed on the table with a polite bow. Martha felt the old chill of her past crawl up her spine. She did not look away. She did not beg. She stepped forward half a pace, letting them see her clearly. "My history is not your entertainment," she said, voice quiet as falling ash. "And if you think shame makes me obedient, you've mistaken me for someone who still fears your approval." The host's eyes narrowed. "You are brave in a room full of silk. Let us see how brave you are when the story reaches the right ears." Leo's gaze turned to ice. "The story will not leave this house." A nervous laugh fluttered. "And how will you stop it? You cannot silence London." Leo's expression did not change. "Watch me." Something in the room shifted then, because they realized he was not threatening rage. He was promising strategy, ruin, the kind that happened quietly at breakfast tables, in closed offices, in ledgers and letters and invitations that stopped arriving. But the host had one last card, and he played it with a satisfied softness. "You may protect her tonight, Your Grace," he said, "but tomorrow there will be witnesses, accusations, perhaps even an inquiry. A man's reputation can survive many things, but not the suggestion that he has been manipulated by a servant." The insult was aimed at Leo, but the blade was meant for Martha. Martha turned her head slightly and met the Duke's eyes. In that look was a question and a dare. "Will you choose me when it costs you?" Leo's mask of ice cracked, not into tenderness, but into something raw. Possession. No. Recognition. A decision hardening into law. He stepped forward and spoke to the room as if issuing a sentence. "There will be no dismissal," he said. "No apology. No spectacle of humiliation to soothe your cowardice." His gaze swept across them, one by one. "If you want a public resolution, then you will have one." The host's smile faltered for the first time. "What are you doing, Blackwood?" Leo's voice lowered. "Ending this." A distant sound rolled up through the house. Heavy hooves, iron against stone. A low breath that vibrated like thunder behind a door. The war beast, restless, as if it sensed the moment a lie was about to become violence. And then Leo said the words that turned the room to stone. "Bring everyone. Tomorrow at noon. I will speak where London cannot pretend it didn't hear." Martha felt the air tighten around her. Fear, awe, hatred, hunger, all of it twisting into one bright, dangerous coil. Because whatever Leo planned to announce, it would not merely protect her. It would remake the rules that kept her beneath them. Noon in London had a different cruelty than night. The fog did not vanish. It merely thinned into a pale veil, revealing the city's bones, soot-stained stone, iron railings slick with damp, windows watching like indifferent eyes. The air smelled of cold metal and wet paper, of horses and ink, of the kind of day when reputations were written, erased, and rewritten without mercy. Word travelled faster than carriages. By the time the bells marked the hour, people had already chosen sides in their minds. They gathered with the hungry discipline of a crowd that pretended to be civilized. Gentlemen in dark coats and bright interest. Ladies dressed in elegance like armor. Faces composed with the precise effort of those who believed they were above emotion. They came to witness a maid's downfall, or a duke's humiliation, or both, if fortune allowed it. Martha arrived without disguise. She wore no borrowed finery, no costume of respectability to soothe their prejudice. She carried herself as she always had, spine straight, chin lifted, eyes clear. If her hands shook, it was only with the quiet force of contained fury. She did not come to beg for mercy. She came to refuse the lie that she needed it. Duke Leo Blackwood stood before them like judgment given shape. He did not look at the crowd as if it could move him. He looked through it, as if seeing the structure underneath. Alliances, debts, secrets. The mask of ice remained, flawless and sharp. But Martha could feel the difference now. It wasn't emptiness. It was restraint, power held in a fist so tight it could crack stone. They wanted a spectacle, Leo said, voice calm enough to terrify. So I will give them truth. A murmur rippled. The host and his supporters waited with practiced confidence, certain the old rules would protect them. The name Wayne hung in the air like a threat that expected her to flinch. Leo lifted a sealed packet. These are statements, he continued, from my handlers, from servants in that house, and from witnesses who heard the test planned long before the beast was brought forward. You plan to bait an animal into violence and call the result proof of a girl's guilt. The host tried to smile. Your Grace, accusations are easy. Leo cut him off without raising his voice. And receipts are harder. He opened the packet and read, not theatrically, but precisely, names, times, instructions given in corridors, bets made in laughter, promises of dismissal and ridicule. Each detail landed like a stone in water, widening circles of discomfort. Faces tightened. Fans stilled. The crowd's hunger shifted into unease. Then Leo's gaze turned colder. And this, he said, lifting a second letter, is the reason you believed you could force me to comply. The host's eyes flickered. Leo read a line aloud, just enough to make the threat unmistakable. Mention the old scandal. Drag the name Wayne through every drawing room. Stain Blackwood by association. The crowd inhaled as one, thrilled and appalled, like people watching a knife drawn in a church. Martha stepped forward before anyone could speak for her. I will not defend my worth to people who measure souls by birth, she said, voice steady and low. If my name once belonged to a ruin, it is because powerful men and polite women decided a child should pay for their sins. I survived it. That is all you need to know. A lady scoffed, weakly. Survival is not innocence. Martha's eyes turned to her, unwavering. No, she agreed. It's strength. The host attempted one last grasp at control. Blackwood, you cannot rewrite society for a servant. Leo's attention snapped to him, and the room felt the temperature drop. I am not rewriting society, he said. I am exposing it. He took a step closer to Martha, not to cage her, but to stand beside her where everyone could see the choice clearly. You wanted her humbled, he said. You wanted her erased. Instead, you will have consequences. He named them calmly. Invitations withdrawn, patronage severed, debts called in, alliances ended. Not revenge with blood, but ruin with paper and truth. The only language their world truly feared. The host's colour drained as he realised power did not always shout. Sometimes it simply closed doors. Outside, a deep, steady sound carried through the damp air. Hooves on stone, controlled now, no longer furious. The war beast, present and quiet, as if it had done what it came to do. The crowd watched the animal, then Martha, then the Duke, and something unsettling settled in them. The creature had not knelt for wealth. It had not bowed for rank. It had recognized something they could not purchase. Leo's voice softened by a single degree, not into romance, but into a vow made of iron. "Martha Wayne is under my protection," he said. "Not as a secret, not as a toy, as a truth." Martha turned her face up to him, and for the first time, the defiance in her eyes carried a different edge. Acceptance without surrender. "I don't belong to you," she said quietly. Leo held her gaze. "No," he replied, "you don't." The words were simple, but they changed everything. Because a duke who could admit that in public was a man willing to break the old chains without replacing them with his own. Martha exhaled, slow, as if letting go of a lifetime spent bracing for the next blow. The crowd began to disperse, not with laughter now, but with the uneasy silence of people who had witnessed a rule shatter. London remained cold. Society remained cruel. But as Martha walked away beside the man who had chosen her openly, she did not feel small. She felt unbroken, and for the first time, the world had no choice but to see it.